Welcome to Her Time Unfolded, where we uncover the women history tried to erase. This episode, Kosala Devi, the forgotten queen who held two kingdoms together: history, myth, and war. In the mid-1st millennium BCE, two kingdoms watched each other across northern India, Kosala and Magadha. Between them sat Kāsi, wealthy, sacred, and worth bleeding for. For a time, there was no war. Not because an army stopped it, because peace walked into a palace, wearing a crown. Then a son imprisoned his father. A king died behind locked doors. And a single marriage agreement, held together by one woman's existence, broke like thread pulled too hard. If you love source-based ancient history where myths and facts don't get blended into soup, subscribe now and turn on the bell. Kosala Devi. And this is how her time unfolded. Before emperors ruled by inscriptions and stone, power in northern India moved differently. It moved through people, through families, through marriage. This was the era later described as that of the Mahajanapadas, great realms competing across the Gangetic plains. Two of these matter most here. Kosala lay to the north and west, associated with Sravasti. Magadha lay to the southeast, with its early capital at Rajagaha. These were not modern states. They were political ecosystems, fortified cities, agricultural surplus, river routes, and rulers who understood that marriage could be cheaper than war. Between Kosala and Magadha lay Kāsi, tied to the prestige and wealth of Ras. Sacred land, fertile land, repeatedly contested. So when this story mentions dowry, it does not mean ornaments or cloth. It means revenue, territory, leverage. Who was Kosala Devi? Kosala Devi was born into the Kosalan royal house. Later Buddhist tradition identifies her as the daughter of King Mahakosala and the sister of Pasenadi, who would later rule Kosala. She enters the historical record not through personal testimony, but through political consequence. Her marriage to King Bimbisara of Magadha was a diplomatic alliance between rival powers, formalized at the highest level of both courts. What distinguishes her in the sources is not ceremony, but settlement. Buddhist texts associate her marriage with a specific Kāsi estate whose revenue was reserved for her personal use, a detail preserved because of what happened when that arrangement collapsed. We do not possess contemporary inscriptions or a personal chronicle for Kosala Devi. What survives comes primarily from later Buddhist and Jain textual traditions. That limits certainty, and it requires caution. The marriage between Kosala Devi and Bimbisara was not symbolic. The Kāsi estate tied to the union provided a steady flow of revenue, sometimes described in the sources as 100,000, designated for the queen's expenses. This grant mattered because it stabilized relations between Kosala and Magadha. As long as Kosala Devi lived, the arrangement held. Her presence functioned as a political guarantee. Kosala and Magadha were not at war. Queens in early monarchies could wield influence, but that influence rarely left direct records. It moved through alliances, patronage, ritual visibility, and legitimacy. Kosala Devi's role was not administrative, but structural. She was less a minister than a living diplomatic seal, pressed in a place by her continued existence. The record splits on a question that matters, but can't be settled cleanly. In many Buddhist accounts, Ajatasatru's mother is Kosala Devi. In many Jain accounts, his mother is Chalana. Both traditions sometimes use the title Vaidehi, which adds to the confusion. Then the Jain stories go further into moral narrative. They describe ominous pregnancy cravings, fear that the child will grow dangerous, and a dramatic infancy episode where the baby is abandoned, injured, and later recognized by Bimbisara, earning the nickname Kunika, sore finger. Powerful storytelling, but it sits in the legend layer, not in hard historical proof. What does hold across traditions is the political core. Ajatasattu succeeds Bimbisara. He moves against his father. Bimbisara dies in captivity, and regardless of who his mother was, Kosala Devi's marriage still mattered because it carried the Kāsi revenue arrangement that helped keep Kosala and Magadha from open war. Ajatasattu moves against his father. In Buddhist narrative, the prince is pushed by Devdatta, a figure cast as corrosive influence inside the court. Some versions say Bimbisara, realizing the danger, steps aside and yields the throne, hoping to prevent bloodshed. But the story does not end with abdication. Ajatasattu has him imprisoned, and the order, in the tradition, is brutal: no food. What follows is one of the most haunting scenes in later Buddhist retellings, and we need to label it honestly. This is tradition, not independently provable history, but it tells us how the event was remembered. In these accounts, the queen, the only person allowed near the prison, tries to keep the old king alive. First, she hides food in a waist pouch. When that is discovered, she hides it in her hair. When even that is stopped, the story becomes almost symbolic. She coats her skin with a mixture of sweet fats and syrup, and the king survives by licking what he can. Then Ajatasattu cuts even that final thread. He bars her from the prison, and after that, the tradition says Bimbisara dies in captivity. Whether every detail is factual or shaped into moral storytelling, the meaning is clear. This wasn't just a transfer of power. It was a rupture so violent the culture kept replaying it, adding details like stitches trying to close a wound that wouldn't close. Kosala Devi dies, described in Buddhist tradition as dying of grief. With her death, the Kāsi arrangement loses its justification. The Kāsi revenue grant collapses. War follows. Kosala Devi is remembered not for speeches, but for what happens when she is gone. After her death, Pasanati withdraws the Kāsi estate from Ajatasattu. Conflict erupts. Later, another marriage between Ajatasattu and Pasanati's daughter Vajra restores the arrangement. The pattern repeats. Marriage builds peace. Death breaks it. Marriage rebuilds it. Kosala Devi sits at the pivot point of that cycle. Later traditions add mythic layers: pregnancy cravings, blood, ominous symbolism. These stories are not evidence. They are moral frameworks used by cultures to process trauma and explain catastrophe. They tell us less about what happened and more about how it was remembered. A modern question often arises: what did she do? The archive answers indirectly. Her marriage delays war. Her status sustains revenue. Her death removes justification. The removal triggers conflict. She is not a commander. She is a keystone. Remove the keystone, and the structure falls. Kosala Devi's life traces a political map. Born in Kosala, crowned in Magadha, her marriage tied to Kashi, her death followed by war. Power does not always look like a throne. Sometimes it looks like a woman whose absence redraws borders. If you enjoy deep dives into historical mysteries, legends, and true stories, consider subscribing to the channel. New videos explore history where myth and reality collide. Let me know in the comments which historical figure, legend, or mystery you'd like me to investigate next.